Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Kallipolis Radio. Today, I'll be reading another of Plato's dialogues. This one's titled, Ion. Thanks for listening. Persons of the dialogue, Socrates and Ion. We begin with Socrates. Hail to thee, Ion! From whence have you come to sojourn with us for the present? Is it from your home at Ephesus? By no means, Socrates, but from Epidaurus, from the feast of Aesculapius. Do the Epidaurians too ordain a contest of rhapsodists in honor of the god? They do, and other kind of the muses' art likewise. What then, did you contend? I do not deny it. And how did you contend? We carried off, Socrates, the first of the prizes. You say well. Come then, in order that we too may win at the Panathenaea. And this will be if a god is willing. Often have I indeed, Ion, been envious of the art of you rhapsodists, for that both your body is decorated, so as to be always becoming to your art, and to appear the most beautiful, and at the same time that it is necessary for you to be conversant with many other excellent poets, and especially Homer, the best and most divine of all, and to learn thoroughly his meaning, not his words merely, is indeed a thing to be envied. For a man would never be a good rhapsodist unless he understood what was said by the poet. For a rhapsodist ought to be an interpreter to the audience of the meaning of the poet. But this it is impossible to do well without knowing what the poet means. Now, worthy is all this to be envied. You say, Socrates, what is true? At least, this very portion of my art has given me the greatest trouble. I fancy, however, I can speak most beautifully about Homer, so that neither Metrodorus of Lampsacus, nor Stesimbrotus of Thasus, nor Glauco, nor anyone else of those who have ever existed, had it in their power to express so many and such beautiful sentiments as I can do, relating to Homer. You speak beautifully, Ion, for it is evident that you will not grudge me an exhibition of your talent. Indeed, Socrates, it is well worth your learning how well I have set off Homer, so that, I conceive, I am worthy to be crowned by the Homeridae with a golden crown. I will make for myself still a leisure time to hear you, but for the present, answer me thus much. Are you skilled on the subject of Homer alone, or of Hesiod and Archilochus likewise? By no means. On the subject of Homer alone. This seems to be enough for me. But there is that about which Homer and Hesiod say the same things. There are, I think, many such. Respecting these, can you better explain what Homer says than what Hesiod does? Equally, Socrates, respecting those where they say the same. But how where they do not say the same? For instance, Homer and Hesiod say something about the prophetic art. Certainly. Well then, whatever those two poets say about the prophetic art, either agreeing or disagreeing, could you explain better? Or one of the clever prophets? One of the prophets. But if you were a prophet, would you not know, if you were able to give an explanation where they agree, to explain likewise where they disagree? It is evident I should. How then are you skilled as regards Homer, but not as regards Hesiod, or any other of the poets? Does Homer speak of other things than what other poets have, taken all together? Has he not gone through the greater part of subjects relating to war, and to the intercourse with each other of men, good and bad, and unskilful, and practised in arts, and relating to the gods, as having an intercourse such as they have with one another and with human beings, and to such as relate to celestial events, and those in Hades, and the birth of gods and heroes? Are not these the subjects relating to which Homer has composed his poetry? You say, Socrates, what is true? Well then, and do not the rest of the poets write about these very things? They do, Socrates, but they have not composed their poetry as Homer has. What then, in a worse way? Very much so. But Homer in a better. Better indeed, by Zeus. Now, thou dear head, Ion, when many persons are speaking about numbers, and one of them speaks the best, assuredly some person will know who speaks correctly. I admit it. Will it be the same as he who knows likewise those speaking incorrectly, or someone else? The same person, certainly. And is it not he who knows the science of arithmetic? Yes. What then, when many persons are speaking about wholesome food, of what kinds they are, and one speaks the best, will one person know that he who speaks the best does speak the best, and another know that he who speaks worse does speak worse? Or will the same person know both? The same person, clearly. Who is he? What is his name? Physician. Let us say, then, universally, that when many are speaking upon the same subject, the same person will always know who speaks correctly and who incorrectly. For if a person shall not know the party speaking incorrectly, it is evident that he will not know the party speaking correctly, at least upon the same subject. Just so. The same person, then, will be skilled respecting both. Yes. Did you not say that Homer and the rest of the poets, amongst whom there are both Hesiod and Archilochus, write about the same things, though not in the same manner, but that the one does so well, the others worse? And I said what is true. If, then, you know the party who speaks well, you will know those likewise who speak worse, that they do speak worse? It is probable. In saying, then, thou best of men, that Ion is clever on the subject of Homer, and all the other poets, we shall not err, since he acknowledges himself that the same person is a competent judge of all such as speak upon the same subjects, and that nearly all poets take the same subjects for their poetry. What can be then the reason, Socrates, that whenever anyone is discoursing upon any other poet, I pay no attention, and am unable to contribute anything whatsoever to the discussion worth mentioning, and really begin to nod? But when anyone brings Homer to my recollection, I am immediately awake, and give my mind to the subject, and am at no loss what to say. It is not difficult, my friend, to guess the reason of this, for it is clear to everyone that you are unable to speak about Homer by art or science. For if you were able by art, you would be able to speak about all other poets, for the whole is surely poetry, or is it not? It is. When a man shall have laid hold of any other art whatsoever as a whole, is there not the same method of viewing it as all the arts? Why I say this, do you, Ion, request to hear from me? Yes, by Zeus, Socrates, I do, for I delight to hear you wise men. I would wish, Ion, that you were saying what is true. But you surely are the wise men, you the rhapsodists and performers, and those whose poems you recite, whereas I speak nothing but the simple truth, as becomes a mere unskilled person. Since the question which I just now asked you, see how trifling it is, and suited to an unskilled person, and for every man to know, namely, that which I spoke of as presenting the same view, when a person lays hold of the whole of any art. Let us then lay hold in our discourse of painting, for it is an art whole in itself. Is it not? Yes. Are there not, and have been, many painters, good and bad? Very many. Now then, did you ever see any person who, as regards Polygnotus, the son of Aglaophon, is skilled in showing what he paints well and what ill, but is unable to do so as regards other painters? And whenever any exhibits the work of those other painters, grows drowsy and is at a loss, and has not what to contribute to the conversation, but when it is necessary to declare his judgment about Polygnotus, or any other painter you please, immediately wakes up and gives all attention, and is at no loss at what to say. Not at all, by Zeus. Well then, in the statuary's art, did you ever see anyone who, as regards Daedalus the son of Metion, or Epius the son to Panopeus, or Theodorus the Samian, or any other single statuary, was skilled in explaining what each had executed well, but as regards the other statuaries was at a loss, grew drowsy, as having nothing to say? No, by Zeus, I never knew such a person as this. Nor, as I think in the case of playing on the hautboy, or harp, and in singing to the harp, and in the recitations of the rhapsodists, you never saw a man who, as regards Olympus, or Thamyris, or Orpheus, or Phemius the rhapsodist of Ithaca, is a skillful interpreter, But as regards Ion the Ephesian is at a loss and unable to give an opinion whether Ion does well or not as a rhapsodist. I have nothing to say against you upon that point, Socrates, but of this I am conscious to myself that, as regards Homer, I speak the best of all men, and am least at a loss, and everybody else says that I do speak well, but not as regards the rest. Consider then why this is. I do consider, Ion, and I commence showing you how this seems to me. This faculty of speaking well about Homer is not an art, as I just said now, but a divine power, which moves you like that in the stone, which Euripides calls the Magnesian, but the common people Heraclean. For this stone not only attracts iron rings, but imparts a power to the rings, so that they are able to do the very same things as the stone does, and to attract other rings, and sometimes a very long series of iron rings hung as in a chain, one from another. But from that stone depends the power in all of them. Thus, too, does the Muse herself move men divinely inspired, and through them thus inspired. A chain hangs together of others inspired divinely likewise. For all the good epic poets compose all their beautiful poems, not by art, but by being divinely inspired and possessed by the Muse. And so too the good lyric poets, just as the Corybantes dance, not being in their sound senses, compose their beautiful lyric poems when they are not in their sound senses, but when they go on according to the harmony and the rhythm. They become mad, possessed by a god, as are the priestesses of Bacchus who, possessed by a god, draw from rivers honey and milk, but are unable to do so when in their senses. And the soul of the lyric poets does that which they say they do. For assuredly they say to us that, drawing from fountains flowing with honey, and gathering flowers from the gardens and glades of the Muses, they bring us their songs as bees do their honey, and are ever too on the wing. And they tell us too what is true, for a poet is a thing light, and with wings and sacred, and unable to compose poetry until he becomes inspired, and is out of his sober senses, and his imagination is no longer under his control. For so long as a person is in complete possession of it, he is unable to compose verses or to speak oracularly. Hence, as they compose not by art, they say many beautiful things relating to their subjects, as you do about Homer. But each is able to compose that alone through a divine allotment, to which the Muse has impelled them, one to dithyrambics, another to panegyrics, another to hyporchomata, another to epic verse, and another to iambic. But in the other kinds each makes no figure, for they do not compose by art, but through a divine power, since if they knew how to speak by art upon one subject correctly, they would be able to do so upon all others. And on this account a deity has deprived them of their senses, and employs them as his ministers, and oracle singers and divine prophets, in order that when we hear them, we may know it is not they to whom sense is not present, who speak what is valuable, but the God himself who speaks, and through them addresses us. And of this assertion Tynnichus the Chalcidian affords the greatest proof, who never composed any other poem which anyone would think worth remembering, but the Paean, which everybody sings, of almost all hymns the most excellent, and, as he himself states, an invention of artless muses. For, in him most especially, does the god seem to me to point out to us that we are not to doubt about those beautiful poems being not human but divine, and the work not of men but of gods, and that poets are nothing else but interpreters of the gods, possessed by whatever deity they may happen to be. And in pointing out this, the deity has through a poet the most indifferent sung a melody the most beautiful. Or do I not seem to you, Ion, to say what is true? To me at least you do, for you somehow, Socrates, touch my very soul by your arguments, and the good poets seem to me, by a divine allotment, to be in this way to us the interpreters of the gods. Now, do not you rhapsodists interpret, on the other hand, the writings of the poets? and this too you truly assert. Do you not then become the interpreters of interpreters? By all means. Mind now, Ion, and tell me this, and do not conceal whatever I shall ask about. Whenever you are spouting well any verses and astonishing your audience the most, or when you are reciting how Ulysses, leaping on the threshold of his house, appeared manifest to the suitors and poured out his arrows before their feet, or how Achilles rushed against Hector, or any of the tales of pity relating to Andromache or Hecuba or Priam, at such times are you quite in your senses or beside yourself? And does not your soul fancy itself carried away in a state of ecstasy by the deeds you are telling, whether they occur at Ithaca or Troy, or however else the verses may be? How clear a proof you have, Socrates, produced! For so I will say, concealing nothing. For when I am reciting any tale of pity, my eyes are filled with tears. But when anything of horror, my hairs stand erect through fear, and my heart leaps. What shall we say then, Ion? That the man is in his sound senses when, decked in a many-tissued garb and with a crown of gold, he bursts into tears at festivals and feasts without having lost any of these ornaments, or feels a fear when he is standing in the midst of 20,000 men, all friendly to him, and no one is stripping him or doing him an injury. He is not, by Zeus, to confess the truth, Socrates. Know you that you rhapsodists produce this very same effect upon the majority of your spectators? I know it very well, for I am constantly looking down from my standing place above those who are weeping or looking fiercely or astonished in unison with what is narrated. For indeed I must pay a great attention to them, in order that, if I set them weeping, I may laugh on receiving their money, but if laughing, that I may weep myself on losing their cash. Know you not, then, that this spectator of yours is the last of the rings, which, I said, receive their power from one another by means of the Heraclean stone? The middle ring are you, the rhapsodist, and the actor, but the first ring is the poet himself. By means of all these does the god draw, wherever it pleases him, the souls of men, having suspended from each other the power, and, as if from that stone, there is suspended a very numerous series of chorus singers and dancers and undermasters, hang the rings depending from the muse, hanging sideways. But from one muse one of the poets hangs, another from another, and this we call by the expression, he is possessed. For the meaning is very similar, since he is held fast. From these first rings some of the poets hang, some from one, others from others, and become inspired by them. Some, for instance, Orpheus, others by Musaeus, but the majority are inspired by Homer, and held fast by him. Of this number, Ion, you are one, and are possessed by Homer. Hence, when anyone sings the verses of any other poet, you fall asleep, and are at a loss what to say. But when anyone recites a strain of that poet, you wake up immediately, and your soul dances with joy, and you are at no loss at what to say. For you say what you say about Homer, not from art or science, but from a divine allotment, and through being possessed. For the Corybantes have an acute perception of such music only as belongs to the god by whom they are possessed, and are not wanting either in gestures or words adapted to that melody, but care not for any other music. So you, Ion, when anyone makes mention of Homer, are not at a loss, but are at a loss when mention is made of other poets. And this is the reason of that about which you were asking. Why, as regards Homer, you are not at a loss, but are so as regards other poets, because you are not by art, but by a divine allotment, a skilful panegyrist of Homer. You say well, Socrates. I should, however, wonder if you can speak so well as to convince me that I panegyrize Homer through being possessed and mad. Nor, as I fancy, should I appear so to you if you were to hear me speaking about Homer. And willing I am indeed to hear you, but not before you shall have answered me this. Of which of the subjects about which Homer speaks do you speak well? For surely it is not about all. Be assured, Socrates, there is nothing but what I speak well about. Surely you do not speak about those of which you happen to know nothing, but which Homer mentions. And what are those which Homer mentions, but which I do not know? Does not Homer speak much and often of arts? For instance, the art of chariot driving? If I can remember the verses, I will repeat them to you. I will recite them, for I remember them. Recite me, then, what Nestor says to his son Antilochus, when advising him to be careful respecting the turning in the chariot race, run in the honor of Patroclus. His words are these. Iliad 23, 335-340. Thyself upon the polished chariot bend, to the left gently, but the right hand horse, with goad and voice urge on, and somewhat yield holding the reins. But let the left-hand steed come near the turnpost grazing, which almost of wheel well made, let the nut seem to doubt if it reach not, but stone to touch avoid. It is enough. Now, whether Homer does or does not, Ion, correctly express himself in these words, who would know the better, a physician or a charioteer? A charioteer, undoubtedly. Whether because he possesses that art, or for some other reason. For no other reason than that he possesses the art. Has not to each of the arts this has been granted by the deity to be able to know a work? For what we know by the pilot's art, we shall not know by the physician's. Certainly not. Nor what we know by the physician's art shall we know by the builder's art. Certainly not. Is it not thus, then, as regards all the arts, that what we know by one art we shall not know by another? But answer me this previous to that. Do you not admit that there is one art of one kind, and another art of another kind? Yes. Do not you make use of the same proof as I do, that when there is a science, one of some things, and another of other things, I call one by one name, and the other by another, and do you not call them so? Yes. For surely, if of the same things there were some science, why should we call them by one name and another by another, when it would be possible to know the same things from both? As, for instance, I know that these fingers are 5 in number, and you know it respecting them the same as I do. Now, were I to ask you whether it was by the same art of arithmetic that both you and I know the same things, or by another art, you would surely say, by the same art. Yes. The question, then, which I was lately about to ask you, answer me now. Whether does it seem so to you, as regards all the arts, in this way, that it is necessary for the same art to know the things, and for a different art to know not the same things? But whether, if the art be different, it is necessary for it to know different things? It seems to me, Socrates, in this way. He, therefore, who has not any art, will not be able to know what is said or done well relating to that art. You speak the truth. As regards the verses, then, which you repeated, will you, or a charioteer, better know whether Homer says well or not? A charioteer. For you are a rhapsodist, but not a charioteer. Yes. Now, the art of a rhapsodist is different from that of a charioteer. Yes. If the science be different, it is conversant likewise about different things. Yes. Well then, when Homer relates how Hecamede, the concubine of Nestor, gave to Machaon when he was wounded a potion to drink, he says, composed, of Pramnian wine, and into it she grates, with brazen grater, cheese from goat's milk made, and for the potion, onion as a relish. To know thoroughly and well whether Homer says this directly or not, does it belong to the physician's or to the rhapsodist's art? To the physician's. Well then, where Homer, in Iliad 24:80, says, she to the bottom went, just like the lead which near the horn of a bull, in meadows living, is placed upon the line, and rushes eager to fish, on raw flesh feeding, bringing fate. Shall we say that it belongs to the fisher's rather than to the rhapsodist's art, to decide on what he says and whether correctly or not? It is evident, Socrates, to the fisher's art. Consider now, you asking, if you asked me, since then, Socrates, you discover what it is fitting for each of these arts to decide upon in Homer, come, find me out, what as relating to the business of a prophet and the prophet's art, are the things which it is fitting for him to be able to know thoroughly, whether the poet has done well or ill. Consider how easily and truly I could reply. For Homer, in the Odyssey, speaks frequently on the subject. For instance, where Theoclymenus the prophet, one of the race of Melampus, says to the suitors, "Why by doom, fated, suffer ye this ill? Involved in the gloom of night are faces, heads, and nether limbs, and burns the loud lament, fiercely, and cheeks with many tears are wet. Of ghosts the porch is full, and full the hall, to Erebus in darkness rushing, and the sun from heaven is lost, and luckless mists come on." And often, too, in the Iliad, for example, in the fight near the mound wall of the Greeks, for there, too, he says, "To them, while eager to pass on, an eagle, high-flying bird, appeared upon the left, and the army checked. For in its claws it bore a snake, of size enormous, with blood-stained, alive and grasping, but of fight not yet regardless. For, on twisting round, it bit the breast of the bird, that held it, near the neck, who, smarting with the pain, let go its hold and sent it to the ground. And midst the throng it fell, and the bird with the wind, screaming, flew. These passages, and others of the same kind, shall I say, it belongs to the prophet to consider and judge of? Yes, if what you say is true, Socrates. And you too, Ion, speak the truth in this. Come then, and, as I have selected for you from the Odyssey and the Iliad, such passages as belong to the prophet, and the physician, and the fisherman, so do you select for me, since you are better versed in Homer than I am, such passages, Ion, as are belonging to the rhapsodist, and to the rhapsodist's art, which it is fitting for the rhapsodist to consider and judge of, better than other men. I say, Socrates, all things. You did not, Ion, say all, or are you so forgetful? And yet it ill becomes a man who is a rhapsodist to be forgetful. Of what then am I forgetful? Do you not remember, you said that the rhapsodist's art is different from that of the charioteer? I do remember it. And did you not confess, too, that, being different, it would know things different? Yes, I did. According to your own account, then, the rhapsodist's art will not know all things, nor even the rhapsodist himself. Except, perhaps, Socrates, things of such a kind. By things of such a kind you mean such as belong nearly to all the other arts? Now what will the rhapsodist know if he knows not all things? He knows, I presume, what is proper for a man to speak, and what for a woman, and what for a slave, and what for a freeman, and what for him who is commanded, and for him who commands. Do you mean that the rhapsodist will know better than the steersman what it is proper for the commander of a ship tossed in a storm at sea to say? No, this at least the steersman will know better. But what is it proper for a person governing a sick person to say? Will the rhapsodist know better than the physician? Not in this case. But what is it proper for a slave, you say? Yes. For example, do you assert that what it is fitting for a slave who tends cattle to say when pacifying cows that are in a savage state, the rhapsodist will know, but not the herdsman? Not I, indeed. But what is it proper for a woman engaged in wool work to say about working in wool? No. But he will know what it is proper for an army leader to say when exhorting the soldiers? Yes, for such things the rhapsodist will know. What, then, is the rhapsodist's art that of the army leader? I should know what it is fitting for an army leader to say. Because you have, perhaps, the art of a general, Ion. For if you happen to be skilled in horsemanship and in harp-playing at the same time, you would have known those who manage horses well and ill. Now, if I had asked you, by which of those arts, Ion, do you know those who manage horses well? Is it by that through which you are a horseman, or by that through which you are a harpist? What answer would you make me? I should answer by that through which I am a horseman. If then you knew thoroughly those who play well the harp, would you not confess that you knew them by that art, through which you are a harpist, but not through that by which you are a horseman. Yes. Since then you know the things relating to armies, do you know them by the art through which you are a general, or by that through which you are an excellent rhapsodist? There seems to me no difference. How say you that there is no difference? Say you that the art of the rhapsodist and of the general is one, or are they two? They seem to me at least to be one. Whoever then is a good rhapsodist, he happens to be likewise a good general. By all means, Socrates. And whoever happens to be a good general is a rhapsodist too. This, I think, on the other hand, does not seem to be true. But the other does seem so, that whoever is a good rhapsodist is also a good general. Certainly. Now, are you not a rhapsodist, the best of the Greeks? Very much, Socrates. And are you also, Ion, a general, the best of all Greeks? Be well assured, Socrates, of this, for I have learnt that too from Homer. Why then, by the gods, Ion, do you, since you are amongst the Greeks the best, both as a general and a rhapsodist, go about acting the part of a rhapsodist before the Greeks, and not of a general? Does there seem to you to be a great need of a rhapsodist, crowned with golden crowns, but none of a general? Yes, for our city, Socrates, is governed, and our forces commanded by your people, and there is no need of a general. But your city, or that of the Lacedaemonians, would not choose me for a general, for ye both conceive yourselves to be competent for that. Know you not, Ion, O best of men, Apollodorus of Cyzicum? Who is he? He whom the Athenians have often selected as their general, although a foreigner, and Phanosthenes too, of Andros, and Heraclides of Closomene, whom this state, although they are foreigners, appoints to the command of armies and other offices in the government, through their having shown themselves men worthy of notice. And will she not choose Ion of Ephesus as her general, honor him should he seem worthy of notice? What, are not you Ephesians Athenians of old? And is not Ephesus a city inferior to none? But as to yourself, Ion, if indeed you say truly that you are able by art and science to praise Homer, you are doing wrong in that, after professing that you know many fine things relating to Homer, and saying that you would make a display, you are cheating me, and want much from making it, so that, although I have been for a long time earnestly making the request, you are unwilling to mention those things in which you are so skilled. But you really become, like Proteus, of many forms, turning yourself topsy-turvy, until at last you escape me and start up a general, in order that you may not show how great you are in the wisdom relating to Homer. If then you really are an artist, such as I just now spoke of, and after promising to make a display relating to Homer, you deceive me, you are an unjust man. But if you are not an artist, but are, by a divine allotment, inspired by Homer, and although you know nothing, are saying many fine things about the poet, as I have stated respecting you, you are doing no wrong. Choose then, whether you wish to be deemed by us a man unjust or divine. Great is the difference, Socrates, for it is much better to be deemed divine. Now this better thing, Ion, is in your power to obtain, at our hands, to be divine and a praiser of Homer, but not from art.